An efficient classroom isn't about Pinterest perfection. It's about creating a space that works for you and your students. Let's talk about layout, storage, and sanity saving tips on this episode of your classroom coffee break. I'm John Van Dusen, a longtime teacher, coach, and Army officer. And in this episode, we're talking about classroom organization and setup, making your space work smarter, not harder. So let's first talk about why an organized classroom matters. So, big picture overview: an organized room leads to smoother transitions, better behavior, and less time wasted. And when I talk about smoother transitions, my classroom is very dynamic. We're up out of our seats, we're moving around a lot. So I need to have my classroom be a place where that can happen easily, and also a place where students can sit and work independently. So we're going to talk about how we do that. When we talk about better behavior, it goes back to that idea of understanding what's expected of me. If I know where everything is in the classroom, I'm not going to be nervous asking questions. Where is this? Where is that? How do I get this? Because I'm already going to know, because the classroom is organized. And when it talks about less time wasted, it's kind of the same idea. If students are understanding and know what you expect of them, we're not going to waste as much time doing the simple things like turning in papers or passing out books. We're just going to know how those things are supposed to operate. So it really ties in close with your classroom procedures, but your classroom has to be set up the right way so that you can have those good classroom procedures. So some common pitfalls that I see all the time is, the first one is going to be over decorating without a purpose. Every bit of the wall is covered with something. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just clutter. And it's one of those things where we talked about when I was a resident advisor, people would have signed blindness. So you put up a sign, pretty soon we don't see those signs anymore. So if you have too many things on your walls, too many decorations that don't have a purpose that you reference all the time, and I'll talk about how I use my room in a little bit, then you may be overdoing it to the point where the efficiency starts to drop off. So that is a common pitfall. Another common pitfall is poor traffic flow. If you have students that have to go from the back of the room to the front of the room for certain things, and they have to maneuver around desks and tables and whatnot, you might just have poor traffic flow. One thing, it's the simplest thing in the world. I had my desk facing a certain way against the wall, the edge towards the wall. And I actually had a really hard time with that, because when students came up to talk with me, or if we had to fix something, there was stuff in the way. So I just took my desk and I turned it 90 degrees, and it fixed so many traffic flow problems. I was amazed. And it was one of those things where I didn't know if it was going to work, but I had to try, because what I was doing wasn't working. So all I'll say with that is try new things. And if it doesn't work, you just found out a way it doesn't work. You can try something new. And the last common pitfall I'll have is not having a system in place for frequently used items. If you are a place that has a lot of items that different people use and you don't have bins, or you don't have specific places for those, the students are always going to wonder, hey, where are the glue sticks? Where are the colored pencils? And they might not know. So that's going to cut down on the efficiency. It's going to increase behavior issues, and you're going to waste time. Personal example from my room, I've had the turn-in bin in the same place for the last 5 years. I've had the pass-back bin in the same place for the last 5 years. And it blows my mind that we will get into May and I have students still wondering if they're putting it in to the right bin or not. So my procedure, I collect everything all at once and it goes in the bin. If you don't have it, or if you're absent, or a plethora of different reasons, that's no big deal. You just have to take it and turn it into the bin. And I've had students turn it into the pass back bin, and then they get it back and they're like, why don't I have a grade on this? It says it's missing in the grade book. So if you have certain things that you use all the time, make sure that you set up systems and procedures to make those work basically on their own. And then make sure you communicate it properly so your students aren't passing back papers into the turn-in bin or turning into the pass back. However they do it, when they do it wrong, they get upset because it shows up missing in the grade book. So let's talk about setting up the physical space. And I thought about putting some pictures up here, but it's really difficult because every room is very different. When I was a STEM teacher, I had a basically a square classroom. And then I moved rooms, and then I had this huge rectangular classroom, and I had to set up the tables different. And I also had to rearrange based on grade level because I had pre-K through fifth grade. So the fifth graders could obviously take up more room, they could work more independently. But with those pre-K kids, I really had to keep things tight and contained. And I was lucky enough that all of our workspaces, all of our tables were on wheels, so I could set them up based on grade level, which you're going to have to think about that too, grade level and topic. So first, start with flow in mind. Take out a piece of paper, draw your classroom, and start putting things on there and see how you think students will flow into and out of your classroom. How are they going to move if you ask them to work with a partner? How are they going to move if you have story time at the front of the desk? I do something we call campfire, which we just push two of the desks out of the way and everybody brings their chair up. So we have everybody's focused on the front board if we're going to watch a video. It gets kids up out of their seats, it gets them moving, and it also focuses their attention on the video I want to show them or whatever's on the board that I want to show them. So start with flow in mind, and then ask yourself, where's the back of the room? And it's interesting in my class because the first day I let students sit wherever they want. Again, eighth grade, a little more independent. We talk about how I'll give them as much freedom as they can handle, and I'll have certain students sit in what they believe is the back of the room. What's interesting about that is when we are taking notes, the notes are in the front of the room, but I'm standing in the back. So those students, if they were trying to get away from me, be as far away from the teacher as possible, they actually did it in reverse because now I'm standing in what they thought was the back of the room, looking over their shoulder, make sure they're taking correct notes. And that took me a long time to figure out, but I try to set up my classroom so that there has to be a front. That's where the information is. But I also try to engage all of the students, and the back of the room is just as active as the front. So another thing that you can do depending on your grade level and topic is define certain zones. So you might have certain zones, and especially elementary teachers, you might have like the story carpet, or you might have independent workspace. You might have areas where there's a bunch of manipulatives and they kind of stay there. So if that's how your classroom is set up, make sure you define those zones and have the students practice. When I'm in this zone, this is what is expected of me. But when I come over here, now this is what's expected of me. And if it's, depending on the grade level, you can post those in the different zones. Or sometimes if you have one class and it incorporates all of those different zones, I know our science teacher has different levels of speaking. So she might say, hey, we're at a level 0 right now. That means nobody's talking. Hey, we're at a level 1. That means table talk. I want you to talk with your partner, but you got to keep it low because everybody's trying to have these mini conversations. So however you do it, define it, set it up as a system, and make it a procedure, and your students will follow it. So next, talking about setting up the physical space is, do you have desks or tables, and setting those up in a way that is conducive to your teaching style. So when I first got into my room, very first day, I had desks. I got a call about 10 minutes before class started. Hey, do you want tables? And I said, yes, absolutely, I do. So in about that 10 minutes, I had about 30 desks leave my room and about 10 tables come back in. And those started out as rectangular tables where I could put 2 students on one side, 2 students on the other. Now I had a plan for desks, but now I had to immediately snap into a plan for tables. And that's kind of what I wanted because my classroom, again, I said, is very dynamic. We do a lot of table talk. We do a lot of group activities, a lot of projects. So those tables for me worked out better. I just needed to have a plan. And guess what? The first couple plans I had were terrible. They were terrible. They sucked. And I had to figure out what didn't work so that I could find out something that did work. Fast forward another year, those rectangular tables are falling apart, and now I have square tables. So now I have 4 students, 1 on each side, and that provides a whole new different set of problems because now I always have somebody's back to the front of the room. Remember we talked about the front of the room before. So sometimes I'll have they'll turn like 45 degrees. So I have 2 that are kind of looking over their shoulder at the board. Sometimes it's okay to have their back to the board, but I have my tables set up in such a way that it's 2 rows of 3 and a row of 2. And what that does is I can do the far side of the room, the middle of the room, the right side of the room. I can also do the back, middle, front. And also, a lot of times we will stand up, push in our chairs, or if we're playing a game, we can move around the room using those tables kind of as game pieces. So if you get the question right, you get to advance forward one. If you get the question wrong, maybe you have to go back one. Hey, you got a free space, you get to skip 2 tables. So we use our tables in several different ways, but it's really up to you on how you want them and your teaching style. I've seen them set up in a W formation. I've seen them set up in a big circle. My good friend Andy, at one point, he had his desk in the middle of the room and a circle around of student desks. So whatever works for you, I would just encourage you to be creative and try different things. And if they don't work, you're just like Thomas Edison. He said he found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So the next part about setting up your physical space is minimize clutter. Now, I'm going to caveat, my desk is my desk. Don't touch the things on my desk. I know where everything is. But when it comes to your classroom, if it gets to be coming up on Christmas break and you haven't used it yet, maybe you can get rid of it, or maybe you can move it. And a couple things that help with this is label stuff, label your drawers, especially if it's something that you use maybe not all the time, but maybe once a week or twice a month. Have a space for it and have it labeled so that the students can help. And then the last part on minimizing clutter is, I know specifically in 8th grade, students love to help. So like my back table is where if you have a project you're working on, it can go back there. That's students bring in paper towel and Clorox wipes and whatnot. All that stays back there. And when it starts to get messy, I ask some students who may be done early, hey, would you take 5 minutes and just straighten up the back? And usually students are all about helping to clean up that space. So now let's talk about your desk, the teacher desk. When I built this outline, I used AI to help me with the outlines. It said, keep only on your desk what you use daily. Now, some teachers might be able to do that. I cannot. I actually have a huge desk. My brother-in-law works at a insurance firm. I was down there visiting. They were redoing all the office furniture, and there's a desk. It is huge. It weighs about 1,000 pounds. And I said, hey, what's going on with that desk? And he said, oh, we're just getting rid of it. It's going to go to the, I don't know, Goodwill, St. Vincent, wherever all the old furniture was going. I said, can we just put it in my truck? And we did. And I had some football players carry up to my room, and it is awesome. It is huge. It's probably 3 feet wide and 6 feet long. And I love it. I love it because I'm the kind of guy who has to have kind of everything laid out so that I can see it. So if you're the type of teacher that can keep their desk clutter free, good for you. But I am reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein that said, if a cluttered desk is an example of a cluttered mind, then what is an empty desk an example of? But I digress. Let's go back to the desk. It is important to have kind of like an emergency drawer. So if you have a fire drill or a medical emergency, and I have it, it's the upper right, and I tell the students it's right here. There's a red folder. If something happens, we need to make sure this red folder goes with us. And that has all of the medical procedures, all of the drill procedures, things that we might have to do if we're not in the room, or if we are in the room and certain things need to happen. There's an extra student roster in there and all of those types of things. And also the substitute teacher, if you're gone, they need to know where that emergency drawer is too. Something I use my desk for, and it's not just for sitting grading papers or doing videos or doing lesson plans or whatnot, but I have a pull out table on my desk. And if a student comes up and they need to talk with me about something or they don't understand something, I say, step into my office. And that kind of keeps my desk as a little off limits because it's my office. But if I invite them in, I can pull out that extra little table. They set their Chromebook down, they set their worksheet down, their book, whatever it is. And this is kind of their little space within my space that we can figure out what's going on. And from there, I have my computer set up. So if they need to see something that was posted on Google Classroom, if they need to see their grade, something, I can access all of those things while having them sit right next to me without having my desk be extra more cluttered. Is that a way to say it? Extra more cluttered. So just have a plan, and whatever that plan is, maybe you go to the student's desk or maybe they come to yours. Just have a plan to have your desk as an area where you can not just do your own work, but also help students. All right, so next we're going to talk about organizing materials. We talked about organizing the physical space, and now materials. So the first one is student supplies, whether that's bins or caddies. I know some teachers will have like table boxes, and all the boxes go to a certain countertop and they get refilled, and then as they need them, they go to the desk. When they're done, they go back. However you do it is fine. Just make sure that you have a plan and a system in place. And what that plan and that system is going to do is it's going to make your classroom more efficient. It's going to reduce behavior problems, and it's going to keep you using an efficient use of your time instead of wasting it. Next, let's talk about paper management. So each class is different. I know some teachers, they hardly use any paper. They have an online textbook. They do all of their assignments on Google Classroom, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Other teachers are strictly paper, and that's fine too. I like to think I'm a healthy mix of both. I try to mix it up so it doesn't get too boring. But if you are going to have, I already mentioned my pass back bin and my turn in bin, make sure you have a way to have those clearly labeled so students aren't confused on where it's supposed to be. Again, apparently I'm not doing very good at that because I still have students that didn't know where it was at the end of the year. Another way is to have a space for blank paper. If you're the type of teacher that has a lot of little poster projects or writing letters or whatnot, have an area designated for just regular printer paper. And if you use lined paper, have a space for if you're passing out worksheets. I have, again, the same thing. And maybe I should put it next to the pass back bin. It is next to the pass back bin. Maybe I should move it. But I have a basket, and I'll go in the morning, I'll make copies of my worksheets, whatever I need. They all go in that basket. So then when we're done with the lesson, I say one person from each table, come get a worksheet for everybody at your table. I still get the question, well, where are they? They're in this bin, same place they've been for the last 6 months. So if you have a better way of doing that, let me know, because obviously I am failing at it. So now when we're talking about materials and supplies, let's talk about wall space. I already mentioned that a lot of times you'll end up with over decoration where there's a lot of stuff on the wall, but it just ends up to be a clutter and it doesn't make sense. I'll just tell you how my room is set up. So we already talked about the front and the back of the room. So the front of the room is I have my huge TV there. That's where the notes go. If I have pertinent information for prime time, that's where that goes. The front of the room is strictly for student engagement. It's all business all the time. Then if you go to the wall to the left, if I'm looking at my front to the left, that is also an engagement wall because I have maps up there. I have a huge map of the United States. Being a history teacher, we talk a lot about where things are happening, and I have arrows that I have cut out and laminated so that I can put it on there. If we're talking about Philadelphia, I'll put a little arrow on Philadelphia so we know where that is. If we're talking about something in New Orleans, I'll put an arrow there. We'll trace out the Mississippi, whatever we need to. I mark on that map. I also have a world map next to that one. So if we're talking about Great Britain coming to the United States, or Monroe Doctrine, where they cut off all of Central and South America, I have two references there that I can use in those maps. So they're not there just for decoration. They're there because I use them every single day. Now, if you're looking at the front of my room and you go to the right, that's where I keep a running timeline with all of our critical content. So if students are struggling with, hey, I know we've talked about this before, but I can't really remember, they can look over there. And that's another place I use for instruction, where I'll walk over and talk about, hey, we're talking about the War of 1812. Remember back to this part in history. And I have the whole year is laid out in a timeline there. And as we get to critical content, I put it on the timeline so that we can kind of see how time progresses. So again, another way of using that space for instruction. And the other thing I have on that wall is a space for missing assignments or no-name assignments. If I get an assignment, no name on it, there's a little space there. I put a magnet. Hey, it's right here. If you end up with a missing in the gradebook and you know you turned it in, check there first. I also have a grid of tape where I put, if we have different worksheets, if this was a worksheet and you were gone that day, I take the extras and I magnet to one of the grids so that if you come and say, hey, Mr. Van Dusen, I need a worksheet, I can go right there. It's in box number 2. Go grab it. So just a way to help organize space and help students help themselves do different things. Now, the back of my room is a place that I don't really use for instruction at all. I have a big bulletin board back there, and typically I'll have student work up there. If we do a little project, if we make pamphlets, whatever, I'll take I'll take them and put them up in the back. And again, I said that back table or that back shelf is a space where if students are working on a project, they have a chance where they can set it down. A lot of times I'll have sticky notes for first hour, second hour, third hour, so they know, their stuff is in the same spot all the time. That's where the pencil sharpener is in the back of the room. And it's just basically a show off space or a keep space. It's not necessarily used for instruction. So 3 of my 4 walls are used for direct instruction almost every single day. So another thing we need to talk about when organizing materials and supplies is, I just call it early finisher options. You're going to have some students, you give them an assignment, they're going to fly through it and they're going to be done and it's going to be perfect. And then they're going to come up and say, now what? You're going to have other students that fly through it and it's not perfect. And you're going to have to say, you need to do this again. And then you're going to have students that aren't going to do it at all and everything in between. But for those students that do it and they do it right and they do it perfect, they need to have something to do. Sometimes they'll do it on their own. They'll either read or they'll draw if that's okay in your room. But if you have something where fast finishers can be occupied without a lot of extra stuff, that's great. And sometimes I'll have a lot of people finish, or if it's a review day, if you go back an episode or 2, we talked about testing. I have screen-free options for students to do because a lot of times they'll just want to pop open their Chromebooks and play their silly little games. Yes, they're silly little games. But back there I have, if you look at episode 3 of the Classroom Coffee Break, I have a bunch of options for screen-free games. We have the dot game, we have tic-tac-toe, I have Sorry, I have Trouble, I have Battleship. Basically all my son's old games that he doesn't play anymore, I bring there. Uno, and a lot of times the kids love playing those games. They might have 10 minutes at the end of class, they pull open, they're playing Sorry. It's awesome. So just have an option, have a system in place so that you're not always scrambling when you have those students that are done early. So the last thing we're going to talk about in this episode is maintaining that organization over time. And a couple ways to do that. The first one is to build routines into your day. I know my last hour, I always say, pick up the floor, pick up your desks. Or I'm sorry, chairs on desks. So they know at the end of the day, they need to put their chair on their desk and they need to pick up the floor. If there's paper on the floor, broken pencils, whatever it is, pick up the floor. Now, my last 7th hour this past year, they were terrible at that. Terrible. I had students that would go out and make the hallway spotless, but our room, not so much. So make sure you have procedures in place built into the end of the day. And then another way to do that is similar to, I would say, like cleaning your house. Like maybe in your house, you do the dishes and take out the trash every day, but mopping the floor is something you do once a week. Maybe cleaning the bathroom is something you do once every 2 weeks. So build that into your classroom routines. And that might mean cleaning off the board because it gets white erased marker and then it gets erased and then it's grungy, whatever. Maybe it's cleaning off the board. Maybe you have a student go grab a vacuum. Maybe you have your students wipe off the desks with a Clorox wipe at the end of every Friday. But whatever you do, make sure you have a routine and a procedure in place and then follow it. And you have a bunch of little worker bees in your classroom. Most of them love to help. So put them to work when it comes to making sure that their space where they are learning is picked up and ready to go. So as a final thought on this, your classroom organization and setup should work for you, not against you. It doesn't need to be like a theme park set up with slides and whatnot. It just has to be functional so that it operates with the way you like to teach and your students are capable of learning. So if you got some benefit out of this episode, I ask that you like, share, subscribe, and share with your friends. And just as a reminder, during the summer of 2025, these episodes are going to come out every other week instead of every week. Just during the summer, it's super busy with vacations. I have 2 weeks of Army training I'm going to be gone. So these are going to be coming out every other week until probably the first week or 2 of September when we get back to school. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making a difference.